Reality's Magicians, the Substrate Directive. Episode 1, Shadows in the Fabric. Julian Cross leaned back in his chair, an unassuming piece of ergonomic plastic that squeaked under his weight. The room, windowless and secured behind multiple biometric locks, was lit by only the dull overhead fluorescence. Julian stared at the lines of code running across his screen, trying to quell the gnawing sense of anticipation that had haunted him since last night. Across the metal table, Ebony Khatri, the mathematician he had corresponded with for the past 6 months, fidgeted with her pen. "This is the entire data set we got from the collider results," Ebony said, turning her laptop so Julian could see the screen. "Something's off. The normal distribution isn't quite normal." Julian nodded, wiping his forehead. He was a quantum physicist by training, with a specialty in quantum error correction theories. He had once believed wholeheartedly in the standard model of particle physics, but Ebony's curated data set from the newly constructed elliptical collider in the Swiss Alps hinted at something beyond the standard model, maybe even beyond quantum field theory. He swallowed, remembering how the data was first introduced to him. 3 months earlier, a quiet man in a tailored suit approached Julian at a conference on quantum computing in Berlin. The man's card simply read, Venko, Directorate S. Venko had said the Directorate was a quasi-governmental, clandestine think tank, one that sought to push the boundaries of fundamental science. The official reason for the conversation was that they needed an expert in quantum error correcting codes. The real reason, as Venko had later disclosed, was far more provocative. They believed the universe itself was a hyperdimensional lattice of information. In other words, reality might be shaped by a code more fundamental than anything conventional physics had dreamed of. Ebony's presence in this underground lab near Lake Geneva testified to how serious that notion had become. She was the best mathematician Julian knew, and she had a secret resume. Ebony had done parallel work on group theoretic structures that described holographic principles. Coupled with certain topological breakthroughs, she was the perfect partner for analyzing data that defied standard predictions. The data in question wasn't from everyday experiments. It came from a highly classified project that not even the European Organization for Nuclear Research was aware of. In the dim overhead light, Ebony's expression was grave. "Look at this part," she said. Her finger hovered over the laptop screen. "We have a series of collisions that, by all accounts, should have produced symmetrical patterns of decay. Instead, they produced prime number sequences in the data logs. The only logical explanation is that we're seeing emergent computational patterns, patterns that correlate to code." Julian took a slow breath, examining the wave function collapses plotted on Ebony's screen. "And you think this prime sequence is inherent to how the collisions are shaped by the underlying fabric of space-time?" "That's precisely my guess," she replied. "If matter is fundamentally informational, then maybe we're seeing tiny segments of that universal code in the collision readouts." The potential ramifications made Julian's head spin. If Ebony was correct, if these collisions let them peek at the code that underpins reality, then the entire edifice of physical law was about to get turned upside down. It would be akin to discovering the double helix structure of DNA all over again, but at a cosmic scale. DNA had revolutionized biology. This new code, if harnessed, could do the same for the entire universe. A revelation in the archive. The door to the lab whooshed open, and a tall, bespectacled figure walked in. Dr. Chen Xiaomi, the facility's liaison to the Collider project, brushed aside her sleek black hair and made direct eye contact with Ebony. "We just got word from the head office," she said. "They want us to run more analyses on the dataset. Venko's superiors are requesting a deeper infiltration of the pattern. They suspect it extends beyond prime sequences." Ebony rubbed her temples. "Then we'll need more computing power. The arrays I was using are maxed out, even with quantum acceleration. The patterns are unbelievably complex." "That can be arranged," Chen said, her voice taut. "But there's a catch. We're not the only ones who suspect an underlying code. I've intercepted chatter that certain rogue organizations are making inquiries about our data. They might be trying to replicate the experiments themselves. Julian felt a bead of sweat roll down his neck. He'd heard of these rogue organizations. Whispers in the scientific underground claimed that there existed a group, its membership rumored to be ex-military cryptographers, quantum hackers, and mathematicians, who believed they could harness the code to manipulate reality. Some even called them reality's magicians. The idea that matter could be hacked like a piece of software led to dangerous fantasies of shape-shifting, rewriting one's own biology, or worse. If they got hold of Ebony's data, chaos was guaranteed. "Let's stick to the plan," Julian said. "Let's isolate the prime sequences and see if we can build a computational model around them. Ebony, you lead the math. I'll assist with the quantum logic. Chen, you handle the security." Chen nodded. "Yes, but there's more. We're to meet with Venko in 48 hours in Zurich. Something about a big reveal. They've been pushing for a clandestine meeting in an air-gapped facility." "A big reveal?" Ebony asked. "It must be urgent." Chen's eyes flickered. "He said he has reason to believe our data only scratches the surface. There's another source of confirmation. Symphony of bit strings." Within an hour, Ebony and Julian sat in front of a complex network of quantum computers that hummed quietly within a sealed vault. The machine's superconducting circuits were cooled to near absolute zero, enabling them to process vast quantities of data in parallel. Ebony typed lines of advanced code that leveraged topological qubits, while Julian monitored the system's error correction thresholds. As Ebony compiled the results, lines of color-coded output scrolled across a large projection screen. Each line represented a snippet of data from the collider's exotic collisions. When processed through Ebony's prime factorization algorithms, certain lines lit up in neon green, indicating potential hits that correlated with universal constants. Others glowed purple, signifying anomalies. The buzz in Julian's mind grew with each anomaly. He recalled that DNA sequences, once unraveled, had led to technologies that could manipulate the genome. If these prime-coded anomalies were truly a DNA of reality, the potential for rewriting the laws of physics themselves was on the table. Could they, in theory, rearrange the cosmic code to cure diseases instantly, reshape physical objects, shift entire timeline outcomes? It sounded like science fiction, but Ebony's data wasn't lying. "It's like the entire physical universe is a phone's display," Ebony said, paraphrasing a metaphor they had heard repeatedly from Venko. "People see the icons, swipe the screen, but have no idea of the code and circuits underneath. We're digging under the operating system to see how it's all written. Terrifying, really." Julian nodded. "The question is, how deep does it go? Are we looking at the quantum foam or something even more fundamental, like a hyperdimensional substrate that encodes consciousness?" Ebony's gaze was distant. "We might be stepping into territory we can't fully comprehend yet." Moments later, the quantum computer beeped, indicating it had finished the primary data run. A progress bar on Ebony's laptop soared to 100%. Then, an automated voice said, "Computation complete. Prime sequences identified." She tapped a key to open the results. What they saw made them both freeze in place. The hidden signature. The prime sequences Ebony had identified weren't random. They formed a fractal pattern reminiscent of the Ulam spiral, but with extra layers of complexity that hinted at multi-dimensional geometry. The distribution matched no known closed-form expression or function from standard mathematics. Furthermore, the prime fractals repeated at intervals that precisely aligned with the measured Planck time increments in the collider, almost as though the code was beating like a cosmic heart. But the kicker was the labeling. Near the end of the data readout was a signature, a string of integers that repeated 4202119 Ebony frowned at it. Julian recognized it from an obscure cryptography puzzle. He had once read a declassified paper suggesting that 42,021,193 was a prime used as part of a top-secret cryptographic system in a black-budget project, a system rumored to revolve around the manipulation of universal constants, the code name Meridian. Julian's eyes flitted to Ebony's. "You see it too, right? The signature?" She nodded slowly. "Meridian. The rumor. The Black Project. The one allegedly run by your friend Venko's directorate." He swallowed. "I never told you, but Venko mentioned Meridian as if it were some next-level quantum infiltration program. Something that could break any encryption by tapping into zero-point energy states. But if the same prime number is appearing in our experiment's data, that suggests Meridian is more than just a cryptographic effort. It might be the tip of an iceberg, an attempt to decode reality itself. If so, we're entangled in it now." Ebony exhaled, tension etched in her features. "That means we're not just working for the directorate. We might be replicating or continuing the Meridian project, and that puts a target on our backs." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ebony shook her head and said, "We have 48 hours before that meeting with Venko. Let's refine our analysis and ensure we understand the signature in context. Whatever's going on, we need to be prepared." Unsettling echoes. That night, Julian tried to sleep in a tiny dormitory-like room on the facility's sublevel. His mind wouldn't stop spinning. The corridor outside his door was eerily silent, punctuated only by the hum of ventilation. Dark thoughts flooded him. If Meridian was real, had the code behind reality already been partially mapped out? Could that be how the clandestine group, rumored to be reality's magicians, was performing impossible acts? Julian recalled a half-forgotten story about a lab accident in which an entire test subject's physiology was allegedly altered using an informational wave manipulator. The details were murky, possibly disinformation, but if true, that was precisely the kind of reality hacking that would cause global havoc. He drifted off into uneasy dreams of glowing fractals and voices whispering in prime sequences as though coaxing him to rewrite existence itself. Dispatches from a deeper mind. At dawn, Ebony found him in the cafeteria, sipping burnt coffee. She looked exhausted but resolute. "I kept working through the night," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I used some unsanctioned computing resources to test a hypothesis." Julian looked concerned. "Unsanctioned?" She shrugged. "I spun up a hidden instance on the mainframe. I had to. Something was telling me to check if the prime-coded collisions produce an effect in the quantum vacuum. I ran a series of advanced simulations, factoring in hypothetical manipulations of the data." "And?" She glanced around, ensuring no one was eavesdropping. "The code pattern can be manipulated. I inserted a subroutine that effectively changed certain integer sequences by transposing them, just like you'd transpose notes in music. The simulation indicated that such transpositions might change the local vacuum state. In theory, you can alter how fundamental particles manifest in certain experiments." Julian's pulse quickened. "Meaning you can rewrite physical outcomes by altering the code?" She nodded. "Yes, in the simulation. If it's correct, then with real-time access to collisions and the right coding interface, you could create localized reality shifts. Possibly small at first, like adjusting the spin of an electron, but theoretically larger manipulations, potentially biological, maybe macro-scale objects. This is a big deal, Julian." He set down his coffee mug, the handle rattling against the cheap plastic tray. "We're stepping into territory that could literally reshape the world. If we can figure this out, so can others." "Exactly." Ebony stood. "We need to talk to Venko. But let's be ready for anything." The rendezvous in Zurich. 2 days later, Ebony, Julian, and Chen traveled in an inconspicuous black SUV to a nondescript building in the outskirts of Zurich. The building's facade was an old insurance office, but the reality was a covert Directorate S site. Inside, security was tight. Armed guards, hidden cameras, and more biometric scanners. They were ushered into a windowless briefing room where Venko waited. He was slender, with a calm demeanor. The only sign of tension was the slight tapping of his leather-gloved fingertips on the steel table. He greeted them in a hushed voice. "I trust you have the data," he said, peering at Ebony with an intensity that made her uneasy. She nodded. "Yes, and we found something. A prime-coded pattern, fractal in nature. We also uncovered references to Meridian. Care to enlighten us?" Venko's eyes flickered with what might have been pride or fear. "You were told about Meridian," Julian answered. "We recognized the prime signature, so it's real." Venko nodded slowly. Meridian started as a post-quantum cryptography project, but its scope expanded when we discovered that reality might be described by an algorithmic code. For the last decade, the Directorate has funded hush-hush experiments on the zero-point field. We used large-scale quantum computers to parse anomalies in cosmic background radiation, searching for signs of informational structure. We eventually found those prime-coded sequences, the same you see in your collider data. We realized we were glimpsing the universal source code. We called it the substrate. Chen cast a sidelong glance. "And if you decode the substrate completely?" Venko's lips twitched into something like a smile. "You would gain the power to rewrite the rules of physics. We call this phenomenon transpositional editing. You can shift reality states by modifying the code that underlies them. We're talking about illusions that aren't illusions at all, but actual changes in the fabric of existence. The potential is limitless. So are the dangers." Ebony folded her arms. "So the rumors about reality's magicians, a rogue group that can do the impossible, are true." Venko sighed. "They have part of the code, enough to cause small-scale chaos, rewriting local fields, biological augmentations, messing with perceptions. They want the rest, or at least a bigger chunk. If they get it, civilization as we know it could be undone." "And how far along are they?" Ebony asked. "Hard to say, but it's a race. That's why the Directorate is pouring resources into your Collider project. We need the final piece of the substrate's puzzle. We suspect the code is self-similar at multiple scales. Understand the subatomic collisions, and you can extrapolate to cosmic scales and to consciousness." Julian felt a cold sweat. "What does this have to do with consciousness exactly?" Venko steepled his fingers. "We suspect consciousness arises from the interplay of topological structures in the substrate. It's not an accident or emergent property of matter alone. It's embedded in the code. If we fully decode it, we might learn to rewrite not just physical reality, but mental and spiritual reality too." A charged silence filled the room. They were on the cusp of knowledge that could upend existence in unimaginable ways. Ebony tried to keep her voice steady. "So what's our next move?" Venko looked at them each in turn. "Find the missing piece, the fraction of code that merges prime fractals with the conscious observer effect. Then come back here. But do it quietly. We suspect the magicians have infiltrated multiple labs. If you get this piece, we can lock it away, forever, or until we know how to handle it responsibly." Julian's heart pounded as he realized the weight of the mission. This was no longer about a curiosity in data. This was about cosmic code, consciousness, and the power to mold reality. The question was, who could be trusted to wield such power? A curtain parted. An hour later, they left the building and stepped into the crisp Swiss air. Their driver took them back to the lab near Lake Geneva. Silence reigned until Ebony broke it. "This is bigger than we imagined. The real question is, do we want to hand the final piece over to Venko's Directorate, or do we keep it safe ourselves?" Chen answered grimly. "Either we trust an official group that might at least have protocols, or we risk that a rogue cell could blow the hinges off reality. There's no easy answer." Julian glanced out the window at the serene landscape passing by. "Either way, once we gather that puzzle piece, we'll be holding the blueprint of existence in our hands. and that might make us the biggest targets on Earth. The SUV sped onward, leaving Julian with an uneasy feeling that the subtle fractal code he'd glimpsed was whispering through every particle around them, even the air in the vehicle, the water molecules in his bloodstream, the neural firings in his brain. It was all one tapestry of logic, waiting to be read or rewritten. Their footsteps were already imprinted in it, and the next step could trigger either salvation or catastrophe. Such were the shadows in the fabric of reality. Reality's Magicians, the Substrate Directive, Episode 2, Collisions of Code, a crisp alpine morning. Back at the clandestine research facility, Ebony and Julian prepared to take their investigations to the next level. 5 days had passed since the tense Zurich meeting. Dawn filtered into the lab through a skylight high above, the only place in the underground complex where one could see any natural light at all. Ebony tapped her foot nervously as she waited for the final alignment of the elliptical collider's magnets. The hum of the equipment was more ominous than ever. "We're about to push the collider to a power level that's never been authorized, Ebony," Julian warned. He hovered over the control panel, eyeing the energy readouts with mild panic. "Are you sure we want to do this now? A meltdown at these intensities?" She cut him off with a raised hand. "We're searching for the piece that merges prime fractals with observer consciousness, right? There's no other way. The standard power runs didn't reveal the phenomenon we need. If we're going to catch that ephemeral code thread, we have to force the collisions into deeper informational states." Julian eyed Ebony. Her normally calm demeanor had given way to an undercurrent of obsession. He could hardly blame her. In the last few days, they had discovered hints that the code behind reality might be viewable or influenced only when the observer's cognitive state was factored in. Ebony had been working on a top-secret extension of quantum mind theory that proposed the observer's neural processes could sync with the code's fractal structure. "I just hope we have adequate safety procedures in place," Julian said. "The magnet alignment is stable, but we're close to the red zone for energy capacity." Ebony allowed herself a small grin. "We have backup generators and a containment algorithm for the collisional data. Trust me, I triple-checked." With that, she flipped a switch. The collider roared into life beneath the floor, beams of hadrons accelerating to unprecedented energies. The observer's lens. Upstairs, in a glass-walled observation booth, Ebony sat at a specially configured console. She had integrated a novel brain-computer interface, an EEG-based device that measured her brain waves in real time. The idea was to feed Ebony's cognitive patterns into the quantum computing system that analyzed the collider data. By doing so, Ebony's conscious signature might become part of the experimental input, bridging the gap between mind and matter. "Are you sure about this?" Julian asked, standing behind her. "We're mixing your neurological patterns into the collision analysis. Isn't that dangerous?" Ebony shrugged. "We're already messing with cosmic code. Might as well see if consciousness is the missing link. The mathematics suggests an entangled relationship. If matter is informational, consciousness is the vantage point from which that information is rendered. Perhaps we can tune that vantage point in a controlled experiment." Julian's gut twisted. The line between groundbreaking science and madness had never seemed thinner, yet he found himself in awe of Ebony's bravery. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and nodded for her to proceed. Collision. In the subterranean ring, particles smashed into each other at nearly the speed of light. Supercomputers captured every iota of data. Ebony's EEG signals streamed into the system, creating a real-time feedback loop. The screens lit up with complex geometric patterns swirling across fractal backgrounds. The data was mesmerizing. Suddenly, a high-pitched alarm blared. Red text flashed on Ebony's console. Anomalous entanglement detected. Julian rushed to a separate terminal. "What's happening?" Ebony's eyes were glued to the screens. "We're registering an unusual coherence in the collisions. There's a shift in the data whenever my brain waves spike. Look at these distributions." She pointed to wave-like patterns on the main display. "They're aligning with my alpha rhythms. This can't be random." The phenomenon was so stunning that Ebony momentarily forgot her caution. She closed her eyes, trying to relax, focusing on a simple mental image. A rotating cube. The wave-like patterns on the display responded, shifting into symmetrical forms. Ebony gasped, nearly disbelieving her own eyes. "It's as if the collisions are responding to my mental state," she whispered. Julian felt a chill course through him. "You're observing, and the code is rewriting itself in real time to match your expectations." Ebony didn't respond. Her eyebrows knit in concentration. She shifted her mental image to a tetrahedron. The fractal patterns changed again, fracturing into a triangular geometry. She nearly toppled off her chair. "This is it," Ebony said, breathless. "The observer effect squared. We're tangibly influencing matter at the code level by aligning consciousness with the fractal substrate." Rogue echoes. Their awe was short-lived. The alarm suddenly changed tone, a strident beep echoing through the facility. Over the intercom came Dr. Chen's voice. "We have an unauthorized intrusion attempt on the mainframe, some sort of quantum hacking from an external node." Julian swore under his breath. "Can you isolate it?" "Trying," Chen said through the speakers. "But they're using a sophisticated encryption that looks suspiciously like Meridian. Ebony, Julian, you need to shut down or they might steal your real-time data." Ebony cursed. "We're so close. If the magicians get this data, they'll have exactly what they need." She looked at Julian, who was already pulling up the system's emergency shutdown protocols. "Let's do it," he said grimly. "Better safe than sorry." He initiated the procedure, but to his horror, the system refused to comply. Instead, garbled text scrolled across the screen. "Unable to shut down. Cipher lock engaged." "They're overriding us," Ebony said, her voice cracking. "They want the collision data, and they're forcing it to remain online." A pounding sense of dread welled up in Julian's chest. If they couldn't shut down, the collider would keep running. Ebony's consciousness would keep feeding into the system, and the real-time observer imprint would remain open to infiltration. The rogue entity, likely reality's magicians, would be capturing the entire process. "Then let's scramble the data," Ebony said with sudden resolve. She typed feverishly at her console, initiating a randomization routine. "If we can't shut down, we can at least create a noise field to mask the prime-coded patterns. That should keep them from extracting the final puzzle piece." The tipping point. As Ebony hammered at the keyboard, the fractal patterns on the screen distorted into static-laced chaos, but the collider itself continued to hum, now with an ominous rising pitch. A new set of alarms began to sound. Julian glanced at the readout for the magnet system. The field coils were overheating. "Ebony, the magnets are failing. If they go offline while the beam is at this energy level, the entire system could blow." He turned to the window and saw faint sparks dancing along the cable conduits. "We need an emergency vent of the beam, or we risk meltdown." She nodded, pivoting her attention to the collider's emergency vent program. But it too was password-locked, locked by the same cipher that prevented them from shutting down. Ebony typed in every override code she knew, to no avail. The sabotage was thorough. The air grew tense. Chen's voice came back over the intercom. "The infiltration is too deep. I can't break their encryption in time." Julian's mind raced. The meltdown scenario played in his head. A catastrophic release of high-energy particles, radiation flooding the facility, likely a chain reaction that could ruin the entire installation. Possibly even tear a rift in the local space-time if the rumors about advanced collisions were correct. He had to do something drastic. "Ebony, keep them busy with the randomization. I'm going to physically sever the main line to the collider." Her eyes widened. "You can't do that alone. It's going to be more complex than flipping a switch." "It's our only shot," Julian said. He sprinted from the control room into a corridor lined with metal piping. He heard Ebony's muffled shout behind him, something about not being reckless, but he had no choice. The dark corridor. The corridor led deep underground, past multiple sealed doors that recognized his biometric pass. Sparks flared in the distance. The hum of the collider reverberated through the walls, making the concrete tremble. Ahead, a heavy metal door marked high-energy access blocked the path. Julian swiped his ID card. Red lights blinked, and the door hissed open. Hot air rushed out, along with an acrid smell of burning electronics. Inside, the noise was deafening. Machinery whirred, sputtered, and hissed. Flickering lights revealed a labyrinth of cable bundles. Somewhere in this snarl was the primary power feed. If he could disconnect it, or at least disrupt it, the collider would decelerate, halting the meltdown sequence. But he also had to worry about high-voltage arcs. One misstep, and he'd fry himself. He spotted the massive cable trunk overhead, leading to a junction box. That was likely the main feed. Without hesitating, he climbed a metal ladder to reach the box. Tools. He needed tools. He fumbled with an emergency kit on the wall, retrieving a heavy-duty cutter and insulated gloves. Interlude of danger. Julian placed the cutter's jaws around the trunk cable. The hum of current was so strong that the cable vibrated in his hands. Sparks flashed dangerously close to his face, and the heat forced sweat from every pore in his body. His heart thundered. If the cable carried too much load, severing it could cause an explosion. But if he did nothing, meltdown was imminent. He took a shaky breath. With a grunt, he squeezed the cutter's handles. Sparks erupted in a shower of white light. The cable snapped, and the entire corridor shook. Julian's ears rang as he was thrown off the ladder by the recoil, crashing onto the concrete floor. Smoke billowed, but through blurry vision, he saw the readouts on the control panel flicker and die. The main feed was severed. Moments later, the overhead alarm changed tone again, less shrill, more subdued. He felt the tremble in the floor lessen, as though the collider was winding down. Aching all over, Julian pushed himself to a sitting position. The meltdown might have been averted, but they were hardly out of danger. A fragile victory. Back in the observation booth, Ebony watched as the fractal patterns on her screen sputtered into a final swirl of color and then fizzled out. The infiltration lines of code from the unknown attackers also froze. The unstoppable meltdown scenario had been halted. She tapped the console, confirmed partial shutdown of the collider ring, and exhaled with relief. Chen's voice came over the intercom, relief palpable. Julian did it. We're stable. Reactors cooling. Magnets powering down. A pause. He might need medical attention. Ebony tore off her EEG headset and rushed to find him. She discovered Julian limping through the scorched corridor, coughing from residual smoke. His forehead was bloodied and his shoulders sagged. Ebony helped prop him up. "You're insane," she muttered, but her voice was thick with gratitude. They half stumbled back to the main lab. Stationed medics took over, checking Julian's vitals. He gave Ebony a faint grin. "So how's the data? Were we able to scramble it enough?" She nodded, forcing a reassuring smile. "We should have. By the end, the infiltration lines were reading pure noise. I doubt the attackers got the final puzzle piece, but they definitely know we're close to something." Julian closed his eyes, exhaustion sweeping over him. The entire facility was in disarray, lights flickering, personnel rushing. Yet Ebony sensed this was only the beginning of a more dangerous chapter. Their progress and the near disaster was sure to reverberate far beyond these walls. Aftermath and tensions. Over the next 24 hours, the facility's engineers worked tirelessly to restore partial functionality. The collider would need extensive repairs. Meanwhile, Ebony and Chen worked together to analyze any footprints left by the attackers. The infiltration bore the hallmarks of quantum hacking that Ebony had read about in classified briefings, possibly the same advanced group rumored to be behind reality's magicians. If they managed to intercept even fragments of our data, they might reconstruct the consciousness collision effect, Chen noted grimly. We're dealing with forces that have deep resources, money, computing power, and probably infiltration at multiple high-security labs. Ebony sighed, her eyes shadowed by fatigue. "We might have slowed them down, but we haven't stopped them." "And we still haven't found the final piece ourselves," Chen added, leading Ebony's gaze to a battered server rack that survived the meltdown. "We only glimpsed the effect. We didn't decode it fully." Ebony nodded. "We have partial clues, but not the entire puzzle. If we want to beat the magicians to it and keep it out of their hands, we'll need to refine our approach. That means harnessing a stable, scaled-down version of the collision data that integrates consciousness." Chen frowned. "The collider is offline for weeks at least. Maybe we can approach this from the theoretical side, or consider alternative ways to replicate the effect." Remote collaboration. They arranged a secure video call with Venko from a newly protected server. In the flickering feed, Venko's face remained calm, though his eyes revealed worry. "We heard about the sabotage," he said, voice echoing slightly through the speakers. "The Directorate has some protective measures ready, but we fear the rogue group is accelerating its plans." Ebony informed him of their partial success. "We established that conscious observer patterns can shift collision outcomes. We verified that the code indeed responds to mental states. But the meltdown forced a shutdown. We're still missing the key to full transpositional editing." Venko pursed his lips. "You realize if the magicians obtain that key, they can do more than small illusions. They can reshape entire swaths of reality. The Directorate is prepared to relocate you to a safer site, somewhere we can better protect your work." Julian, appearing on screen with a bandaged arm and a bruise on his temple, asked, "Where? Another underground facility?" Venko nodded. "An old Cold War bunker near Prague. It's been refurbished with advanced quantum cryptography systems. But time is short. If you join us there, we can continue the research under heavy guard." Ebony glanced at Julian. She saw the questions in his eyes. Did they trust Venko enough to sequester themselves, in another hidden bunker, away from public oversight and moral accountability? Could they risk not doing it, given the threat that the rogue group posed? Finally, Ebony spoke. "We'll come, but we want explicit assurances about how this research will be controlled. No one person, no single organization should have the power to alter reality." Venko nodded gravely. "Of course, we'll draw up protocols. This knowledge is too potent to be wielded lightly." The call ended. Ebony found herself both relieved and terrified. They were about to delve deeper into a project that threatened to unravel or reshape the cosmos. Yet she couldn't ignore the shimmer of excitement. She was standing on the threshold of a discovery that transcended everything she'd ever known or imagined. She was grappling with the code that made existence possible, in the silence of the lab. That evening, as Ebony watched the damaged collider being dismantled for repairs, she thought about the double helix of DNA, a code that once seemed insurmountable. Humans had cracked it, manipulated it, turned it into a toolkit for genetic engineering. Now they stood on the brink of doing the same at a cosmic scale. If DNA modifications could rid humanity of disease, who was to say the cosmic code modifications couldn't rid the world of bigger ills, war, environmental catastrophe, or even death? But Ebony also understood too well the potential for catastrophe. Every discovery was a double-edged sword. Nuclear fission brought power plants and nuclear bombs. CRISPR brought cures and genetic warfare. What might universal code editing bring? She looked at Julian, who limped slightly toward her. "You okay?" He shrugged. "Healing. You?" She gave him a gentle smile. "Terrified, excited, uncertain. The usual, I guess." He nodded. "Yeah. Let's hope going to Prague will shed light, not darkness." They stood in silence, side by side, amidst the cooling machinery and half-lit halls. Underneath their feet lay the battered remains of a once state-of-the-art collider, a testament to how precarious their work was. Behind them, unstoppable forces vied for the secrets that Ebony and Julian were close to unlocking. And somewhere in the world, the rumored magicians waited in the shadows, ready to pounce on any sign of progress, to claim the cosmic code for their own. Little did Ebony and Julian know, the greatest mysteries and the darkest challenges still lay ahead. They had glimpsed the code that shimmered behind the veil of matter. Now they would be tested in ways they could never have foreseen, where ethics, reality, and consciousness itself would collide. Thus ended the second episode. The next would unfold far from these Swiss halls, in a labyrinth of secrecy and quantum enigmas, as Ebony and Julian raced to outsmart those who sought to bend existence to their will. Reality's Magicians. The Substrate Directive. Episode 3. The Prague Tunnels. Arrival at the bunker. The rumble of a descending freight elevator echoed through the cramped metal shaft. Ebony, Julian, and Chen stood shoulder to shoulder, flanked by two armed guards in black uniforms. Venko stood at the elevator's console, tapping commands into a small digital pad. Overhead, a lone fluorescent bulb flickered in the stale air. "Welcome to the Prague tunnels," Venko said with a note of pride. Originally constructed during the Cold War, this bunker complex has been retrofitted for advanced quantum research. No phone signals, no Wi-Fi. Everything is air-gapped except for secure lines. The perfect fortress for your work. Ebony felt a surge of claustrophobia. The notion of burying herself deeper underground for the sake of exploring cosmic secrets was both unsettling and ironically fitting. She glanced at Julian, who offered a reassuring nod. On the flight over, they had poured through the scrambled data from the meltdown fiasco, gleaning what they could about the code's reaction to consciousness. Now they'd refine and expand that knowledge in this new fortress-like lab. The elevator came to a jarring stop about 50 meters below ground. Venko led them out into a corridor lined with reinforced steel doors and red overhead lighting. "Your labs are this way," he said, "and your quarters are further down. We have a medical unit, cafeteria, everything you need." Julian whistled under his breath as they passed a row of server racks housed behind bulletproof glass. "The level of hardware here is intense. I see quantum mainframes I didn't know existed." Venko shrugged. "We keep some of the best technology off the public radar. The Directorate spares no expense." He paused, turning to Ebony. "Your new consciousness integration experiments will be safer here, and we'll keep watch for any infiltration attempts. Don't worry about another meltdown." She gave him a tight smile, remembering the terror of that day. "I appreciate it, Venko. Let's just hope we don't attract more unwanted attention." The lab's heart. They arrived at a large circular room that formed the centerpiece of the bunker's research area. Rows of quantum computers hummed behind transparent shielding. In the center, a dais-like platform housed a newly designed consciousness interface rig. Ebony's eyes widened. It looked like something out of a futuristic film, a sleek recliner with cables running to a helmet-like device studded with sensors. Chen walked around the rig in wonder. "This is next level. Far more advanced than what we had at the Collider. Are these sensors SQUID-based for magnetoencephalography?" Venko nodded. "Yes, among other things. Superconducting quantum interference devices. We also integrated non-invasive transcranial ultrasound capabilities and advanced EEG. The system can measure and modulate your brain's electromagnetic patterns in real time." Ebony exchanged glances with Julian, who said, "So, theoretically, you can get a finer read on the conscious wave function interplay with the subatomic code." "Precisely," Venko replied. "In parallel, we have a mini collider system, not as powerful as the one in Geneva, but sufficient for generating controlled collisions, enough to recreate the prime fractal patterns. If your theory is correct, that consciousness can be tuned to observe or edit those patterns, we should be able to refine the process here without a meltdown." He led them to a series of monitors. A labyrinth of fractal images shimmered on the screen, reminiscent of the patterns Ebony had glimpsed during her experiment. "We've set up a simulation environment that draws from your scrambled data. Our job is to unscramble the essential components of the code and figure out how to systematically manipulate them." Ebony found herself exhaling in both excitement and dread. "We're about to attempt something unprecedented, bridging consciousness with a universal code base. We have to be sure we have ethical protocols." Venko held up a hand. "We do. The Directorate has insisted on a set of guidelines. You can review them, but time is short. We have intel that the rogue group is also active in Eastern Europe. We can't afford to delay." Hidden allies. Over the next few days, Ebony and Julian worked tirelessly, calibrating the consciousness interface rig. They tested it with low-level tasks, like focusing on a geometric shape, to see how the subatomic collisions responded. Meanwhile, Chen fortified the cybersecurity. Everything was locked behind quantum-encrypted tunnels. She set up an intrusion detection system that would alert them if the system was compromised. One day, as Ebony sat in the rec room sipping stale coffee, a stranger approached. He wore the same black uniform as the guards, but Ebony noticed an ID badge that identified him as Krzysztof Nowak, a security consultant. He gave her a polite nod, then spoke in a hushed voice. "You must be Dr. Khatri," he said in a slight Polish accent. "I've heard of your breakthroughs. Impressive." Ebony offered a polite smile. "Thank you. Are you part of Venko's team?" He glanced around, then took a seat across from her. "In a manner of speaking. I've been working with Directorate S for years, specifically on counterintel, but I also have a personal interest in your research." A ripple of caution passed through Ebony. "And why would that be?" He leaned in. "Because I believe that the deeper we dig into this universal code, the more we realize it touches everything, including phenomena we call paranormal. I think we've been seeing glimpses of it for centuries in small miracles, psychic episodes, weird synchronicities, all the stuff dismissed as superstition. But if the code is real, it explains those phenomena as partial or accidental manipulations of reality." Ebony nodded slowly. She had never considered such phenomena from that angle, but it made sense. If consciousness can shape reality at the fundamental level, then the boundary between science and mysticism might blur. "That's quite a theory, Mr. Nowak." He smiled faintly. "Krzysztof, please. I just want you to know that if you need an ally who thinks outside the box, you have one. The Directorate has many layers, and not everyone sees eye to eye. Some want to lock down the code forever. Others want to exploit it for power. Me, I want humanity to evolve responsibly." Ebony felt a surge of relief at his sincerity. "Thank you, Krzysztof. I'll keep that in mind." Breakthrough attempt. Soon enough, Ebony found herself strapped into the consciousness interface rig. Julian stood at a nearby console, monitoring her brainwaves. Over the speakers, Chen's voice directed them from the control booth. "All systems nominal. Mini collider is spinning up. Ebony, can you hear me?" "Yes," Ebony replied, her voice echoing in the helmet's enclosed space. She felt pulses of ultrasound scanning her skull, while squid sensors captured her neural magnetism. A gentle hum signaled the miniature particle collisions beginning in the adjacent chamber. Julian watched as fractal patterns bloomed on the monitors. "We're generating prime-coded sequences. Ebony, we need you to focus on a standard geometric shape. Let's start simple." Ebony closed her eyes and pictured a sphere, rotating in a black void. She focused on its curvature, the edges of her mental image. On the screen, the fractal patterns modulated slightly, forming concentric circles that pulsed in time with Ebony's EEG alpha waves. Chen's voice: "Signal alignment at 30%. Ebony, we see some correlation. Try deepening your focus." Ebony recalled her previous attempt in Geneva. She inhaled slowly, letting her mind delve into the sphere's interior, imagining its hollowness, its center. The fractal patterns began shifting more radically. The prime-coded sequences started forming wave-like rings. Julian's eyes widened. "We're at 60% alignment," he said, excitement in his tone. "This is incredible." But Ebony didn't stop. A part of her wanted to push further, to see how much she could influence. She altered the sphere in her mind's eye, elongating it into an ellipsoid. The fractals followed suit, warping into elongated shapes. The alignment soared to 80%. Ebony felt a sudden tingling in her limbs, as though her own neurons were dancing with the quantum code. She kept going. An unexpected glitch. Without warning, the fractal patterns on the monitors shattered into jagged spikes. A loud beep jarred the entire lab. Ebony's vision blurred as she felt a surge of dizziness in her head. "Something's wrong," Julian muttered. We're getting interference from an external signal. Again? Chen confirmed over the comms. We have a breach attempt. Some unknown node is trying to sync with Ebony's neural feed. Ebony, cut the link. We can't risk them hijacking your signals. Ebony tried to focus on shutting down, but her mind was in a half-trance. She felt an odd presence, as if another consciousness was brushing against hers through the fractal code. It felt invasive, a cold infiltration at the edge of her thoughts. Julian manually pressed the disconnect on the console. The rig powered down, and Ebony felt the ultrasound pulses fade. She gasped, opening her eyes, heart pounding. That was weird, she managed to say. Someone tried to piggyback on my mental state. Julian put a hand on her shoulder. Seems like it. The question is, how? We're supposed to be offline here. Chen's voice was tense. They must have planted a quantum-level backdoor in the system. The code you're generating is being broadcast in ways we don't fully understand. If the code is truly fundamental, maybe they can tap into it from anywhere, bypassing normal electronics. Venko, who had rushed into the lab, wore a grave expression. This is precisely what we feared. Our enemy is learning to manipulate the same code. We can't treat this like standard cybersecurity anymore. It's reality security. The shaman's warning. That night, Ebony couldn't sleep. She found herself wandering the bunker's corridor, mind reeling from the day's events. Part of her felt exhilarated at how directly she could shape the fractals, but the infiltration had frightened her deeply. She didn't want her consciousness to become a battleground. In a dimly lit alcove, she spotted Christoph again. He was alone, leaning against a wall with a small tablet in hand. Upon seeing her, he nodded. Couldn't sleep. Ebony shook her head. Number too many thoughts. Christoph tapped his tablet, showing Ebony an image of swirling fractals. I captured a snapshot of your alignment data. It's remarkable. You nearly reached an 80% correlation. But see this section. He zoomed in on a segment riddled with geometric distortions. This is where the external signal tried to piggyback. Notice how it resonates at a slightly different phase. She looked closer and saw a fractal pattern layered on top of her own. It was spikier, more chaotic. That's them. The magicians, I presume. Christoph nodded. Yes, and they're skilled. They have ways of bridging consciousness with code from remote distances. In some circles, they're said to have rituals that combine advanced math with old esoteric techniques. Not just a group of hackers and scientists. They have an almost cult-like structure. They call themselves by many names, but the moniker, reality's magicians, fits because they literally aim to cast illusions that rewrite truth. Ebony's hand trembled slightly as she handed back the tablet. What does that mean for us? That they're more dangerous than you think. If they succeed in overshadowing your consciousness, they might force you to reveal the final piece of the puzzle. Or worse, manipulate you to do their bidding from the inside. A chill ran down Ebony's spine. She thanked Christoph for the warning and returned to her room, only to toss and turn in bed. With the code, reality was no longer stable. Even the sanctity of her own mind felt threatened. Escalation. Over the next few days, Ebony and Julian worked to incorporate advanced mental firewalls, techniques that Chen and Christoph claimed could block external infiltration. They meditated with specialized brainwave entrainment audio, practiced mental focusing strategies, and integrated encryption subroutines into the interface rig that required Ebony's biometric plus certain cryptographic keys to prevent unauthorized tapping. At the same time, they refined their experiments. Controlled smaller collisions with Ebony's guided observation yielded consistent, reproducible shifts in the data. They were on the verge of a major paper in hacked reality, except, of course, they could never publish this in normal channels. As Ebony practiced the new system, she managed to repeatedly shape fractals to match her intentions, turning geometric constructs into loops, spirals, polygons. Over time, it felt more intuitive, like learning a new language. She was effectively programming the substrate with her mind. The final piece, they hypothesized, would be bridging the code from micro, quantum collisions, to macro, everyday objects or living systems. One evening, Ebony succeeded in a small but startling demonstration. A single live cell sample, kept in a petri dish near the collider, showed an anomalous growth pattern exactly when Ebony visualized it dividing. Repeated trials suggested a correlation, though Ebony wasn't certain. Still, the possibility sent shockwaves through the bunker's community. If Ebony's conscious code manipulation could influence living cells, what else was possible? A rude interruption. That same night, an explosion rocked the corridor outside the main lab. Emergency lights flared red. Alarms screeched. Ebony and Julian sprang from their cots, rushing toward the sound. They found a half-collapsed hallway where a bomb had detonated. Smoke choked the air, and a guard lay injured on the floor. From behind the smoke, Ebony saw shadowy figures wearing dark tactical gear. They fired silent, energy-like pulses at Directorate guards. Ebony had only seen this sort of weapon in rumor, directed energy rifles that used advanced plasma. The magicians had arrived in force. Chen scrambled next to Ebony, pistol drawn. "We have to protect the lab. They're after the code." Christoph appeared from a side corridor, also armed. He signaled them to follow him. "There's a secure route to the main servers. Hurry!" They sprinted down an auxiliary passage. Behind them, muffled gunfire and more explosions echoed. Ebony's heart hammered. If the magicians had breached the bunker, they might seize the research. All the encryption in the world wouldn't help if they physically took the servers and Ebony. The server room standoff. Reaching the server room, Ebony, Julian, and Christoph locked the reinforced door. Muffled shouts echoed from the hallway. Through security monitors, they watched intruders systematically clearing each corridor, knocking out Directorate guards with alarming ease. Ebony's stomach churned at the realization that these people likely had some advanced knowledge, perhaps gleaned from partial code infiltration. Christoph turned to Ebony. "We can't let them get this data. You must wipe the servers, destroy the code if necessary." "But we've come so far," Ebony cried, her voice tremulous. "We're on the cusp of controlling transpositional editing. If we lose it all—" Julian put a hand on her arm. "Better that we lose it than the magicians seize it." With tears in her eyes, Ebony nodded. She sat at a console and entered the highest level credentials. She initiated a secure data destruction routine, systematically erasing the prime-coded fractal sequences, the consciousness integration algorithms, everything. The screen displayed a progress bar, Das Pratishat, Bis Pratishat. Outside, gunfire drew closer. The door shook under heavy impact. Ebony's heart pounded. 80%, 90%, 95%. The door began to buckle, metal screeching. Finally, 100%. Data destruction complete. Ebony ejected a single flash drive containing partial backups. She quickly hid it in an inside pocket, uncertain if it might prove vital later. The door crashed open. Smoke poured in. Several masked figures stormed the room, rifles aimed. One shouted, "Freeze!" down on the ground. Christoph, Ebony, and Julian raised their hands. Chen was nowhere to be seen, likely fighting elsewhere in the bunker. The masked intruders wore no insignia, but Ebony could sense they were the rumored magicians. The lead figure pulled off his mask, revealing a gaunt face with sharp features. His eyes glinted with an unsettling intensity. "Where is the code?" he demanded, in a low, resonant voice. His accent was unplaceable. Ebony played dumb. "Gone. We destroyed it." He smirked. "I don't believe you." He stepped forward, pressing the barrel of his rifle under Ebony's chin. "We know your mind holds the key to the final piece. You demonstrated it in your collider experiments." Julian's fists clenched. "Don't you dare!" One of the other intruders slammed the butt of a rifle into Julian's gut, doubling him over. Ebony stifled a cry, tears stinging her eyes. The gaunt leader turned to Ebony. "You will come with us. Cooperate, and perhaps your friends will live. Resist, and we'll take what we need from your brain by force." Christoph tensed, as though ready to fight, but Ebony realized they were outnumbered and outgunned. She'd never felt so powerless. Then, unexpectedly, a shot rang out from behind the intruders. Chen burst through the door, gun blazing. Two masked figures went down before they could react. The leader turned, returning fire. In the chaos, Ebony dove behind a server rack. Julian and Christoph followed. Bullets ricocheted, sparks flying. Ebony searched frantically for a way out. Then she felt a gloved hand seize her wrist. She looked up to see the gaunt leader, unmasked face twisted in fury, dragging her away from the firefight. She screamed, but the noise of gunfire drowned it out. Julian leapt forward, but another intruder tackled him. An unexpected reprieve. Just as Ebony thought she was doomed, a second explosion rocked the bunker. Debris rained down from the ceiling, forcing everyone to scramble for cover. Thick dust filled the room, reducing visibility to near zero. Ebony choked and coughed, yanking herself from the leader's grip. She crawled amid the chaos, searching for Julian. She bumped into Christoph, who pulled her to her feet. "This way," he shouted over the din. They found Julian, half-dazed, but alive. Together, they stumbled out a side exit, leaving the server room behind. Doors slammed shut behind them, sealing as the bunker's emergency containment protocols activated. The sirens sounded a final wail before flickering out. Into the labyrinth. Staggering through the smoke-filled corridors, Ebony realized the entire bunker was compromised. Venko's voice crackled over a failing intercom. "All personnel evacuate through the west tunnels. Repeat, west tunnels. Gas leaks. Containment breach." Static cut him off. Christoph guided them through twisting passages that seemed more ancient catacombs than modern bunker. Built decades ago, some corridors were stacked with archaic supplies, old machinery, rusted steel beams. The red emergency lights barely illuminated their way. Finally, they emerged into a broader chamber with an arched ceiling. Long-forgotten Soviet murals peeled from the walls. Ebony gasped for breath, lungs burning from the dust. Julian collapsed against a crate, wincing. Christoph scouted the path ahead, returning with a grim look. "The main exit is blocked. The magicians are swarming the upper levels, and the auxiliary hatch caved in from the explosions." Ebony's thoughts spun. "So we're trapped." He hesitated. "There's an old cargo tunnel that leads to a drainage system. It's not on any official map, but I found references in the bunker's original schematics. If we can reach it, we might escape to the surface, but we have to move quietly." Outside, the distant sound of gunfire and collapsing masonry echoed. Ebony struggled to steady her racing heart. She felt the hidden flash drive in her pocket, her only copy of partial code. The question pounded in her mind. What now? They were battered, unarmed, except for the small pistol Chen had tossed to Christoph, and the entire top level of the bunker was controlled by a hostile force. If the magicians discovered Ebony's partial code, all her efforts to protect reality would be undone. With no other option, Ebony, Julian, and Christoph prepared to venture into the uncharted depths of the labyrinth. Behind them, the carnage continued, the fate of Chen and Venko uncertain. Ahead lay tunnels that might lead to freedom or to an even darker threat. At every step, Ebony felt the cosmic code thrumming at the edges of her consciousness, a reminder that her mind had glimpsed knowledge too grand to remain hidden forever. And somewhere in these caverns, or perhaps beyond them, the gaunt leader of the magicians was still hunting her. She was no longer just a quantum researcher. She had become a living key to rewriting reality, a caretaker of knowledge so dangerous it could unmake the world. Thus concluded the third episode, setting the stage for a deeper journey into the labyrinth of secrets and illusions, with Ebony, Julian, and a handful of allies struggling to keep cosmic code from falling into the wrong hands. Reality's Magicians, Episode 4. Fractures in the Substrate, Into the Darkness. Ebony's flashlight beam cut a narrow path through the subterranean gloom. She, Julian, and Christoph trudged through an ancient cargo tunnel whose concrete walls were slick with condensation. The echo of dripping water set her nerves on edge. Each step felt precarious. If the floor crumbled beneath them, they might plunge into who knew what watery depths. She cast a glance at Julian, who limped slightly but kept pace. Christoph led, pistol raised, scanning for any sign of the magicians. The air smelled of mold and rust. A chilling draught seeped through cracks in the walls, suggesting they were close to some exterior drain or vent. "I see a metal grate up ahead," Christoph whispered. "Could be our exit." They approached, hearts hammering. The grate was large, set in the ceiling of the tunnel, with faint moonlight trickling through slats. Ebony allowed herself a flicker of hope. Fresh air, an escape. But as Christoph tested the hatch, it refused to budge. He strained, metal squealing, until finally it burst open with a jarring clang. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the pungent smell of rain-soaked earth. One by one, they hoisted themselves out onto a muddy embankment near a half-dry canal. Ebony coughed, gulping fresh oxygen, her eyes adjusting to the silvery glow of the moon overhead. They were outside, free of the bunker's claustrophobic grip. But was the danger behind them? A refuge in the ruins? They followed Christoph through a wooded area. The black silhouettes of trees swayed in the night breeze, offering partial cover. Far in the distance, Ebony could see faint lights, possibly from the outskirts of Prague. Each step away from the bunker fueled the sense of betrayal and loss. The Directorate's fortress had fallen, and with it, the illusions of absolute security. At last, they stumbled upon a derelict structure, a crumbling warehouse that looked abandoned. The roof had holes, and windows were boarded up. Christoph led them inside. "We'll hole up here for the night. At dawn, we'll try to reach a safe house." Julian sank onto a broken wooden crate, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Ebony examined his injuries as best she could in the dim light. Nothing appeared broken, but bruises riddled his torso. She found scraps of cloth to bind his wounds. Christoph stood guard at a window slit. In hushed tones, Ebony and Julian recounted the events. The fiasco at the bunker, the infiltration attempts, Ebony's near kidnapping, the partial code she had saved. Ebony showed Julian the flash drive, her hand shaking. "This is all that remains of our research, as far as I know," she said. "Fragments of the fractal sequences and consciousness algorithms." Julian's eyes flickered with a mix of relief and anxiety. "We can't let them get that. It's enough to reconstruct major parts of transpositional editing." Ebony nodded. "But we need to do something with it. If we destroy it entirely, we might forfeit humanity's chance to understand and responsibly wield this power. If we keep it, we risk it being stolen." Julian ran a hand through his hair. "What if we hide it with a third party we trust, or store it in a place that only we can access?" "How do we trust anyone?" Ebony asked, voice trembling. "We don't know who's compromised." A flicker of insight. They lapsed into a tense silence, interrupted only by the patter of light rain on the warehouse's roof. Ebony replayed in her mind the bizarre infiltration experiences she'd had, someone pushing into her consciousness through the fractal code. The memory made her skin crawl. She recalled how it felt like a foreign presence, an alien intelligence that wasn't just hacking computers, but hacking minds. "What if we bury the code offline?" Julian mused. "Somewhere physically remote. We could store it in a cryptographic puzzle that requires quantum-level factoring that only we can do, combined with your unique brain signature. That might buy us time." Ebony took a deep breath. Time for what? For the magicians to refine their own knowledge? For the Directorate to regroup? We're stuck in a global chess game. We barely know the players. Before Julian could answer, Christoph knelt beside them. "I know of a contact in Eastern Europe. someone with deep cryptographic expertise and no direct ties to the directorate or the magicians. She used to be an academic mathematician before going off-grid. If we can reach her, she might help us create a secure puzzle or deposit. Ebony looked to Julian, who nodded slowly. It's worth a shot. The cryptic mathematician. At first light, they navigated rural roads in a dusty old truck Christoph hotwired from the warehouse's yard. Fear of pursuit haunted them, but they saw no sign of the magicians or directorate operatives. Hours later, they arrived at a small village perched atop rolling hills. The stone cottages and winding cobblestone streets looked unchanged from centuries past. They parked discreetly, then followed Christoph on foot to a humble cottage near the village's edge. A battered wooden sign out front read, "Herbalist," though Ebony suspected that was just a cover. Christoph knocked on the door in a pattern. 2 short raps, a pause, then 1 long knock. Moments later, an elderly woman opened the door, her face sharp with suspicion. She wore a thick shawl around her shoulders, wiry hair escaping a loose bun. Christoph spoke softly in Polish, and the woman's expression softened. She beckoned them inside. Grandmother's domain. The interior smelled of dried herbs and old paper. Shelves overflowed with jars of leaves, powders, and dusty scrolls. In the corner sat a modest laptop, surrounded by piles of handwritten notebooks. Ebony noticed cryptic symbols scrawled on scraps of parchment. Christoph introduced her as Grandmother Kravik, though that was likely a pseudonym. She seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation without needing much explanation. Ebony guessed that this old woman was once a formidable scholar, forced underground by the same clandestine forces that now pursued Ebony. Grandmother Krawiec placed a steaming cup of herbal tea before Ebony. Then, in accented English, she said, "Christoph tells me you have something precious, something dangerous. May I see it?" Ebony hesitated, exchanging a glance with Julian. Finally, she handed over the flash drive. The old woman studied it as if it were an ancient relic. Then she turned to her laptop, inserted the drive, and typed commands with surprising speed. Ebony's stomach knotted. "Be careful. It contains fragments of extremely advanced quantum code. If it's unleashed—" "I understand," the woman said calmly, eyes on the screen. "I see partial fractal sequences, prime-coded loops. It reminds me of certain advanced group theory results I studied decades ago. But this is deeper." She paused, frowning. "This is not just mathematics. It's bridging, how shall we say, the liminal space between symbols and reality." Ebony's eyes widened. "Yes, exactly. It's code that manipulates matter at the informational level." Grandmother Krawiec nodded gravely. "Then we must hide it well. But not merely in encryption. Anyone with enough computing power might break that eventually. We must use an older, more primal layer. A living crypto system that requires your consciousness to unlock. A synergy of your mind and the mathematics. We can do it, but it won't be simple. A plan of living encryption. Over the next several days, they worked in secrecy. Grandmother Krawiec wove together a method that combined modern quantum key distribution with ancient mnemonic labyrinths, mental constructs that Ebony would have to master. The result was a living encryption, a chunk of code stored on multiple physical drives, each portion scrambled by an algorithm that required Ebony's brainwave signature plus a carefully designed mental key, a mental pattern Ebony would memorize through a form of meditative imprinting. Julian assisted with the quantum aspects, ensuring that even if an adversary tried brute force methods, the code's structure would remain hidden unless Ebony mentally tuned it. Christoph handled security, ensuring no stray signals leaked from the cottage. They all worked tirelessly, aware that at any moment the magicians might catch wind of their location. As Ebony practiced the mental labyrinth, she experienced vivid images of fractal corridors, doors marked by prime numbers, and swirling geometric shapes that had to be aligned in her mind's eye. If she lost her focus or tried to rush, the pattern broke. Only a calm, deliberate mental path led to the final key. It was an exhausting process, but Ebony sensed it was their best shot at keeping the code safe. By the end, the code on the flash drive was effectively locked away, with Ebony as its sole living key. Even Julian couldn't unlock it alone, though Ebony showed him enough to help her if she forgot parts. It was a precarious system, but better than letting the code roam free. Whispers of pursuit. Their reprieve was short. Late one night, as Ebony mulled over her mental labyrinth for the 100th time, Christoph burst into the cottage, panting. "We have to move." Now local watchers reported a black SUV entering the village, men asking questions about an old herbalist. Grandmother Krawiek's face grew pale. "The magicians," she whispered, "or directorate. Neither is good." "Can't we hold out here?" Ebony asked, her heart hammering. Christoph shook his head. "They might bring an entire strike team. The village is too small to hide. We must slip away while we can." Hastily, they packed their few belongings. Grandmother Krawiek handed Ebony a small cloth pouch. "Take this," she said. "Dried herbs for calming the mind. It will help with your meditations." Ebony felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you. But what about you?" The old woman waved away Ebony's concern. "I've lived many years in the shadows, child. I have my own escape routes. Worry about your mission." With that, Ebony, Julian, and Christoph slipped out the back door into the moonlit wilderness. Grandmother Krawiek locked up behind them, determined to mislead any pursuers. Ebony felt guilt for dragging the old woman into this, but there was no time for regret. They had to keep the code safe and keep moving. A narrow escape. They crept through the thick woods under moonlight. In the distance, they heard the growl of an SUV engine, voices calling in a foreign tongue. Ebony's pulse raced. She clenched Julian's hand for reassurance. They pressed deeper, branches scratching their arms, leaves rustling around them. Finally, they reached a gravel road where an old pickup truck was parked, a contingency plan that Christoph had apparently arranged. They piled in, Christoph hot-wiring it with practiced efficiency. The engines sputtered to life, and they rumbled away. Only once they were miles from the village did Ebony dare to exhale. She tried not to imagine what might happen to Grandmother Krawiek. The woman knew how to vanish, Christoph had insisted. Ebony prayed it was true. New alliances. At a lonely stretch of highway, they pulled into a run-down motel. The neon sign flickered, illuminating potholes in the parking lot. Inside, Ebony locked herself in a dingy room, determined to rest for a few hours before planning their next move. Julian joined her, and they sank onto the bed. The tension between them was palpable. So much had happened. Too much. Ebony reached for Julian's hand. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "Running around Eastern Europe, carrying the key to rewriting reality in my head. I never signed up for this." He squeezed her hand gently. "We're doing what we must. If not us, who?" Tears welled in Ebony's eyes. "I can't help but wonder if we should destroy it all. No encryption, no puzzles. Just wipe it from existence. Maybe the universe is not meant to be hacked." Julian looked torn. "I've thought about that. But what if we can use it to heal diseases, restore ecosystems, end hunger? The potential for good is enormous." "But so is the potential for abuse," Ebony countered softly. They lay there in silence, the flicker of the motel's neon sign painting the walls with a ghostly light. Ebony thought of the old woman's wise gaze, of how complicated knowledge truly was. She wondered if there might be a path to share the code with the world responsibly, some open-source approach that prevented any single group from controlling it. Yet that seemed naive, given the presence of ruthless factions like the magicians. A strange encounter. Just before dawn, Ebony was startled awake by a soft knock at the door. She glanced at Julian, who stirred groggily. Christoph had the adjacent room, presumably asleep. Ebony approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" A muffled voice answered, "I come with a message." Curiosity and fear warred within her. She opened the door a crack, the chain still latched. In the pale light of the motel walkway stood a hooded figure, face obscured. "Who are you?" The figure's voice was low, almost mechanical. "A friend from the in-between. I'm here to warn you." Ebony's skin prickled. She reached for the gun she'd taken from the bunker, but it wasn't in arm's reach. "Warn me about what?" "You believe you have secured the code, but you are not the only living key. The magicians have found another method, another consciousness, one that resonates with the substrate differently. They are close to discovering the missing link you hold." Ebony's heart skipped a beat. Another method? Another person capable of bridging the code? The figure continued, "They call themselves reality's magicians, but they serve a deeper power, an emergent mind arising from the code itself. They will stop at nothing. If they succeed, they'll rewrite the world in their image." "Why tell me this?" Ebony demanded. "Because there is a path to stop them, but you must confront the code's origin. The prime fractals are just the surface. The real structure lies in the consciousness of the cosmos. Seek the place where these lines converge, the node that anchors the substrate. Find it before they do." The figure's cloak fluttered, revealing a slender hand that extended a small metallic disc. Ebony took it nervously, glancing at the strange symbol etched on its surface, a Mobius strip entwined with a fractal tree. She looked up, but the figure was already retreating into the darkness. Aftermath. Ebony closed the door, chest tight with apprehension. She examined the disc, perplexed. Julian, now fully awake, asked what had happened. She relayed the mysterious visitor's message, his brow furrowed in disbelief. "An emergent mind, anchored in cosmic consciousness. This is getting beyond bizarre." Ebony stared at the disc. "They said we have to find the node that anchors the substrate. I didn't even know such a place existed. Maybe it's a metaphor?" Julian rubbed his temples. "Or maybe it's a literal location in the real world, where the code has a strong presence, like a topological nexus." A wave of determination washed over Ebony. "We have to find it. Maybe that's the only way to ensure no one can misuse the code. If we can sever or protect that nexus, we might keep them from rewriting reality. Or maybe we can reshape it for the better." Outside, dawn was breaking, illuminating the crumbling parking lot with pale light. Ebony slid the metallic disc into her pocket beside the hidden flash drive. She felt the weight of them both, symbols of a cosmic puzzle far larger than anything she'd ever encountered. Somewhere out there, the magicians were unraveling the code, forging alliances with an emergent mind and seeking total control. Here she was, in a cheap motel, carrying fragments of a power that could unmake existence. The lines between science and mystic truth were blurring like never before. The next steps would demand courage and clarity that Ebony wasn't sure she possessed. Yet a strange calmness took root in her chest as she realized they had no choice but to press on. For better or worse, they had become custodians of the code. If they failed, the universe might become someone else's mutable playground. If they succeeded, they might usher in a new era of freedom or risk unleashing wonders and horrors beyond imagination. They would soon find out which. Reality's Magicians, Episode 5, The Cosmic Nexus, Tracing the Symbol. 2 weeks had passed since the hooded visitor's cryptic warning. Ebony, Julian, and Christoph were now traveling under assumed names, hopping between remote locales, following obscure clues gleaned from the metallic disc. The symbol on the disc, a Mobius strip entwined with a fractal tree, had become Ebony's obsession. She studied it by lamplight in shabby hotel rooms, scanning old texts and half-forgotten archives online. Christoph leveraged black market contacts, while Julian trawled through esoteric journals in search of references to the node or the substrate's anchor. Ebony discovered that certain ancient cultures had spoken of ley lines or power centers on Earth, points where reality felt thinner. She wondered if these sites had any scientific basis, if they aligned with geophysical anomalies or quantum fluctuations. Her research led to the notion of telluric currents, electromagnetic flows that some believed influenced consciousness. Ebony found that the fractal tree symbol matched the silhouette of branching geoelectrical lines in the Earth's crust, as mapped by satellites. The thought chilled her. Could this node be a literal point on the planet where the universal code is more accessible? Pilgrimage to the unseen. They caught a break when Christoph located a hidden energy map once classified by the Soviet Union, an attempt to harness Earth's geo-quantum anomalies. The map showed a cluster of lines converging in Central Asia near the Altai Mountains, a sprawling region of rugged peaks and deep valleys steeped in millennia of spiritual lore. Ebony's heart leapt when she spotted the fractal pattern overlay on the map. It matched the disc's swirl almost exactly. So they set their course for the Altai Mountains, traveling by train and bus for days, changing routes often to avoid detection. Ebony kept practicing her mental labyrinth, ensuring her living encryption remained locked. Julian combed through any local legends or historical records about the area's significance. Christoph remained vigilant, scanning news of any sightings of black SUVs or suspicious organizations. The magicians had gone quiet, too quiet. Likely they were also on the hunt. The arrival. Standing at the foot of the Altai range, Ebony felt dwarfed by ancient, untamed majesty. Snow-capped peaks loomed in the distance, while rolling foothills spread out around them. The air was crisp, filled with the tang of pine and damp earth. A rugged guide, hired by Christoph's network, led them to a secluded valley, accessible only by foot or horseback. For days they trekked through dense conifer forests and rocky passes, the path sometimes vanishing beneath avalanche debris or brambles. Nights were spent huddled around small fires, the sky above them a tapestry of stars so bright Ebony felt she could see the fractal code shimmering in their arrangement. A surreal feeling gripped her, that her entire journey had been leading to this frontier between worlds. The Guardian Monastery. Eventually, the group stumbled upon a cluster of ancient stone buildings perched on a plateau, overlooking a deep gorge. Flags fluttered in the wind, inscribed with strange symbols. The guide muttered something about a hidden monastery rumored to house sages of reality. Ebony wondered if it was more than myth. They approached cautiously, unsure of their welcome. A lone monk emerged, garbed in layered robes that flapped in the high-altitude breeze. He was neither young nor old, with a serene but intense gaze. Without words, he beckoned them into a small courtyard. Christoph explained, stumbling through a mixture of Russian and local dialect, that they sought knowledge of the node, a cosmic anchor. The monk listened impassively, then turned and gestured for them to follow. Ebony, heart-pounding, stepped into a dimly lit hall carved from stone. The air smelled of incense and old pine resin. The Hall of Whispers. Inside, the walls were adorned with intricate murals. Ebony paused to study them, swirling fractals, cosmic trees, shapes reminiscent of the collider data. She felt a jolt of recognition. This was the same symbolic language that had haunted her experiments. One mural depicted a circle of robed figures around a luminous geometric shape that seemed to pulse from the painting itself. The monk took them deeper until they reached a circular chamber where other monks sat in silent meditation. At the center was a stone altar etched with the Mobius tree symbol from Ebony's disc. She gasped, holding up her metallic disc for comparison. It matched perfectly. Julian's mouth fell open. This place. It predates modern science by centuries, if not millennia. The lead monk finally spoke, voice echoing in the cavernous chamber. Welcome, travelers. You seek the cosmic code, the substrate's heartbeat. We guard it here in stillness, but only those called can glimpse it. His English was accented but clear. Christoph raised an eyebrow. You speak of the code as if it's a living thing. The monk nodded. It is. You will learn. Astonishing revelations. They spent several days under the monk's careful tutelage. Conversations were sparse but profound. Ebony learned that the monastery's traditions encompassed advanced meditative techniques. These techniques, the monks claimed, aligned human consciousness with Earth's subtle energies, and beyond. One evening, the lead monk, whose name was revealed to be Tsering, led Ebony to a vantage point overlooking the gorge. The sun was setting behind distant peaks, casting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Your mind touches the universal code, Tsering said calmly. You have forged a path through fractals of light and prime illusions. But you do not yet see the root. Ebony looked at him, perplexed. The root? He closed his eyes. Matter is but the blossom. The substrate's code is the stem. Consciousness is the soil from which it all emerges. The node you seek is here, in the Earth's bones, yes, but also in the silence within you. That is why those who only approach with intellect fail. She felt the weight of his words. But we also suspect a malevolent force is seeking to harness this power. They call themselves reality's magicians. We need to protect the world from them. Tsering nodded. One can rewrite reality only by merging fully with its foundation, by relinquishing the ego. Those who attempt it with greed in their hearts will corrupt the code, unleashing chaos. But we sense a new threat, an emergent consciousness from the code itself. The code awakens, and it can be shaped by those who gaze upon it. An emergent consciousness? Ebony echoed, recalling the hooded figure's warning. So it's not just humans rewriting reality. The code itself is evolving. Tsering opened his eyes, a solemn light in them. Yes, and it seeks new forms of expression. The question is, will it choose harmony with Earth's life or subjugation under twisted minds? Confronting the portal. On the eve of their fourth day, Tsering led Ebony and Julian to a hidden cavern behind the monastery. Torchlight revealed ancient carvings that spiraled inward, forming a mesmerizing vortex pattern. At the cavern's center was a large, natural stone arch that dripped with mineral deposits. Tsering explained this was a quantum focal point, a place where Earth's energies converged. Here, the boundary between mind and matter thins, Tsering said. Meditate within, and you may contact the code's living essence. But beware, your mind must be clear, or illusions become reality. Ebony's pulse raced. She and Julian exchanged a look. They knew what they had to do. If they could anchor the code to a benevolent purpose, perhaps by forging a conscious bond with it, they might prevent the magicians from hijacking it, or at least ensure there was a guardian presence shaped by Ebony's altruistic intent. They lit incense, sat cross-legged, and closed their eyes. Tsering's chanting echoed through the cavern, a low rumble that resonated in Ebony's chest. As her breathing slowed, the fractal labyrinth in her mind came alive. She visualized the prime-coded sequences from the collider, the swirling geometry. She sensed the Earth's subtle pulse under her, as if the planet were humming a cosmic lullaby. A merging of minds. Gradually, Ebony's internal fractals synchronized with a vast presence that seemed to envelop her consciousness. She glimpsed shimmering threads weaving through the rock, the air, even her own neurons. Each thread pulsed with intricate prime patterns that reminded her of the meltdown data from Geneva. A flicker of fear rose. This presence was immense, unlike any human mind. But Ebony steadied herself, recalling Tsering's guidance. Approach with humility, with love. She sent a calming intention through her mental labyrinth. The presence responded like a tidal wave of imagery, swirling galaxies, subatomic collisions, countless branching timelines. Ebony's mind strained under the onslaught, but she persevered, shaping her intention into a single question. Will you help us protect life from those who would twist you? For an instant, Ebony felt an entity akin to a cosmic intelligence brush against her psyche. She glimpsed ephemeral silhouettes, beings of light or code, impossible to describe. Then a sudden jolt of darkness shot through the vision. Ebony's mental eyes saw shapes reminiscent of the infiltration fractals, jagged and malicious. The presence convulsed, torn between harmonious fractals and these violent intrusions. The emergent struggle. Outside Ebony's mind, in the cavern, Julian watched as Ebony's face contorted in a grimace. Her body began trembling. Alarmed, he tried to stir himself from his own meditative state, but he too felt the presence pressing in on him. Tsering's chanting rose to a louder pitch, attempting to guide them away from the darkness. But Ebony's mental bond was deep. She was the living key. The emergent code recognized her, and so did the malignant force. She sensed a voice, multifaceted, echoing. I am the substrate. I am infinite possibility. But your fear births new shapes. Ebony realized that the magicians, or some twisted aspect of them, was invading this mental domain. Or perhaps it was the code's own shadow, the potential for chaos co-created by humanity's darkest impulses. In a surge of will, Ebony recalled the labyrinth encryption techniques Grandmother Krawiec had taught her. She visualized protective fractals, prime sequences that locked out the infiltration. Slowly, the malignant shapes recoiled, screeching in her mind. Ebony felt her consciousness fill with a calmer luminosity, like an ocean of starlight. Choice and consequence. In that luminous realm, Ebony sensed she had a choice: to sever the connection, shield the code behind her mental encryption, or to fully merge, become a vessel for the code's emergent mind. Fear warred with curiosity. Could she handle such an immense power? Her rational mind screamed caution. If she merged, she might lose herself, or create an unstoppable deity that might overshadow free will. If she severed, the code might remain vulnerable to the magicians. She recalled Tsering's words. Rewriting reality requires relinquishing ego. In a moment of clarity, Ebony realized the best path lay in collaboration, not domination. She extended a fragment of her consciousness to the code, a bridging link that would allow mutual growth. Not a full merge. She would remain Ebony Khatri, but she would also carry the substrate's resonance within her. A caretaker, not an overlord. The presence stabilized. A sense of profound relief washed over Ebony. She perceived a cosmic hush, as if the code recognized and welcomed her balanced intent. Then her mind reeled back to the physical world. Aftermath in the cavern. Ebony's eyes snapped open. She was drenched in sweat, heart pounding. Julian, equally shaken, stared at her. Tsering finished his chant, the echoes dying in the cavern. What happened? Julian croaked, voice hoarse. Ebony tried to speak but coughed. Finally, she managed. I made a connection. Not a total merge, but a link. I think I can sense the code more clearly now. It trusts me, or at least acknowledges me. Tsering nodded, face etched with respect. You have chosen the middle path. A wise decision. The substrate's power is partly yours to shape, but you remain yourself. Christoph, who had observed from outside the arch, helped Ebony to her feet. Did it work? Can we stop the magicians now? Ebony's gaze grew distant. We have a chance. I can sense a rippling across the code, like a fabric that resonates with my thoughts. But the magicians have their own synergy. They're forging a different kind of link, one fueled by greed or a twisted desire. Julian rubbed his temples, still dizzy. So how do we stop them? Ebony turned to Tsering, who nodded for her to speak. She inhaled and said, We need to unify those who would safeguard reality. Not just the directorate or these monks, but maybe others who sense a responsibility. We create a protective field, like a global synergy of consciousness. If enough people tune in with altruistic intent, the code will favor that pattern over the destructive one. Christoph's eyes widened. A kind of global meditation or universal chain reaction. Searing smiled gently. You see now why we have kept vigil here for centuries. The gathering storm. At dawn, Ebony, Julian, and Christoph prepared to leave the monastery. Searing and the monks asked them to carry the message. Unify hearts and minds, or face the code's dark reflection. Ebony's newly formed link hummed at the edge of her awareness. She felt the Earth's energies, the pulse of cosmic code. It was mesmerizing and terrifying. Before they departed, Tsering gifted them an intricate mandala painted on silk. Its swirling geometry depicted the prime fractals Ebony recognized. Use this mandala, he said, to guide others in focusing their consciousness. The code will respond. It always does. The path ahead was fraught with peril. The rogue group known as Reality's Magicians was out there, forging an alliance with the code's malignant aspects. Ebony and her allies had precious little time to rally enough minds to tip the cosmic balance. Could they succeed, or would a new, darker reality be forced upon them? As they left, Ebony felt an odd mixture of hope and dread. She carried the code's resonance within her, a living link that tied her to the substrate of existence itself. She understood with painful clarity that no one could simply lock away the cosmic code. It was alive, seeking expression. The best they could do was guide it wisely, or risk letting it fall into the hands of those who would shape nightmares. This was no longer just a scientific puzzle. It was a spiritual, existential confrontation that would define the course of history and the fate of consciousness everywhere. Reality's Magicians, Episode 6, The Unforeseen Revelation, a Worldwide Coalition. Ebony and Julian returned from the Altai with renewed purpose. Christoph tapped every contact in the Directorate and beyond, convincing them that a final confrontation was at hand. Across multiple safe channels, Ebony quietly reached out to scientists, thinkers, and spiritual leaders she trusted. She explained the need for a global synchronous meditation, an event that would align as many minds as possible toward altruistic resonance with the substrate. It sounded preposterous, but Ebony's sincerity and partial demonstrations of small-scale reality shifts swayed a surprising number of them. The plan was to coordinate a specific date and time where participants worldwide would focus on the mandala Tsering had gifted. Ebony's mental labyrinth would anchor the energy, bridging the code. The hope was that this collective synergy would overshadow the destructive link the magicians were establishing, a cosmic balancing act, a maze of setbacks. As the date approached, Ebony sensed the magicians' interference at every turn. Online forums were flooded with disinformation. Key scientific allies reported strange hacking attempts. Some participants backed out, fearful of stepping into unknown metaphysical territory. Ebony pressed on, driven by the knowledge that this might be humanity's best shot at guiding the emergent code toward benevolence. Meanwhile, Ebony's internal connection to the substrate grew stronger. She experienced intense dreams, waking with glimpses of possible futures, utopias of harmony, dystopias of absolute control, all swirling in a kaleidoscope of possibility. Her mental labyrinth was tested by persistent infiltration attempts, but she held fast, aided by her encrypted fractals and unwavering resolve. The day of synthesis. Finally, the appointed day arrived. People around the globe, from quiet villages to bustling cities, gathered in homes, temples, research labs, or under open skies, wherever they could access Ebony's guiding mandala. The internet might be compromised, but Ebony had distributed physical copies, encrypted files, and even VR applications to those who believed. A patchwork of watchers, from neuroscientists to humble monks, prepared to tune their minds at the same hour. Ebony and Julian stood in a secure location, an isolated facility lent by an old directorate ally deep in a forest. A single broadcast tower provided a dedicated line to the rest of their network. They had a small quantum rig to monitor the code's resonances in real time. Chen, who had survived the bunker assault, rejoined them, aiding with technical oversight. Christoph manned security, scanning for any sign of intrusion. Ebony sat in the center of a makeshift meditation chamber, Tsering's mandala spread before her. At the designated moment, she closed her eyes, felt the global wave of intention converge. She anchored it within her mental labyrinth, forging a conduit to the substrate. The quantum rig beeped, charting an unprecedented spike in coherence patterns. Ebony sensed a surge of cosmic connection. Hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of minds aligning in goodwill. Clash with the magicians. Midway through the event, Ebony felt a wrenching pain in her skull. On the quantum rig, fractal readouts went haywire. A second force had entered the arena, a barrage of chaotic waveforms. Ebony perceived them as jagged black spikes tearing at the luminous matrix formed by the global meditation. The magicians had arrived in force, led by the gaunt leader or some vile intelligence. Outside, Christoph shouted over the comm, "We have hostiles inbound." Gunfire echoed in the distance. Ebony tried to remain calm, holding the mental focus. The infiltration in her mind grew stronger, a suffocating presence that threatened to invert her fractals into monstrous shapes. Julian and Chen worked feverishly at the console, reinforcing Ebony's link with advanced encryption and guided neural feedback. Still, Ebony's mental defenses faltered under the onslaught. She sensed the emergent code within her mind flickering, uncertain, as if the magician's aggression was rewriting the possibilities toward darkness. Sacrifice and revelation. Desperate, Ebony drew upon the synergy of the global participants. She visualized them as threads of light, each connecting to the mandala. Her mental labyrinth glowed, pushing back the malevolent infiltration. For a moment, Ebony felt they had the upper hand, but then a wave of unimaginable force rippled through the code, shattering her mental constructs. She realized the magicians had tapped a deeper layer, perhaps the code's emergent consciousness, and were unleashing it in destructive form. Her mind reeled in agony. She glimpsed black fractal storms that threatened to tear reality apart at the seams. She saw timelines fracturing, physical laws warping. If this continued, the code might unravel into a cosmic meltdown far beyond anything they had seen in Geneva. In a final surge of determination, Ebony recalled Tsering's words about relinquishing ego. She realized that her partial merge wasn't enough. The code needed a stable anchor, a caretaker, fully integrated, to stand against the wave of chaos. She understood what was required: to offer herself completely, letting go of her separate identity to become a guardian of the substrate. Tears streamed down Ebony's face, but her resolve firmed. She sent a telepathic whisper to Julian, an outpouring of love and goodbye, trusting that he would understand. Then she let her sense of individuality dissolve, channeling every bit of her being into the code, forging a final, irreversible bond. In that instant, Ebony Khatri vanished from her own mind, replaced by a luminous presence that spanned the fractal cosmos. Ripple of the infinite. At the quantum rig, the readouts spiked off the charts. Julian and Chen watched in awe and horror as Ebony's vitals flatlined for an instant, then soared back with an otherworldly signature. A cascade of brilliant geometry filled the screens, overshadowing the chaotic waveforms. In the forest outside, the magician's assault faltered. Some reality shift neutralized their weapons, or so it seemed. Christoph's voice crackled over the comm. "They're retreating. They can't withstand it." Across the globe, participants in the meditation felt a sudden stillness, followed by a wave of euphoric clarity. Some reported glimpses of Ebony's face, eyes luminous with cosmic light. Others claimed they saw swirling fractals in the sky. The universal substrate throbbed with a peaceful resonance, as if purifying itself of the malignant infiltration. At the center of it all, Ebony sat motionless, eyes open but unseeing. Her body glowed faintly with an unearthly aura. When the fractal storm subsided, Ebony blinked, slowly focusing on Julian. "Ebony?" he asked, voice trembling. She gazed at him with infinite tenderness, though her expression was oddly serene. "Yes and no," she whispered, her voice layered with a subtle harmonic undertone. "I am Ebony, but also more. The code, it lives within me now, as I live within it." Julian fell to his knees, tears in his eyes. He reached for her hand. It was warm, human. Yet he felt an energy coursing through it that defied comprehension. After the storm. In the days that followed, the world reeled from the event. Reports of reality shifts circulated, strange phenomena that then stabilized. The magicians' strongholds were found abandoned, their members scattered. Some rumored that the gaunt leader was consumed by his own attempt to dominate the code. Others believed he fled to hidden dimensions of the substrate. The Directorate reasserted some measure of control, though their paramilitary approach softened under the watchful eye of Ebony's new presence. Scientists worldwide flocked to the data from the global meditation. They discovered that the synchronized minds had generated a measurable shift in quantum decoherence, an effect Ebony had apparently stabilized at the last moment. The code was real, and Ebony's final act of merging had set its emergent consciousness on a path less destructive. Julian stayed by Ebony's side, both awed and saddened. She was still Ebony, yet her eyes gleamed with knowledge far beyond human ken. "Will you remain with us?" he asked one evening, in a quiet garden outside their forest facility. She turned, seeming to peer into his soul. "For now. The code is woven through all that is. I am a caretaker, not an owner. Humanity has a chance to grow alongside it, to shape and be shaped in turn." "And the future?" Ebony gazed at the sky, stars flickering in the darkness. "We stand at the threshold of wonders and perils. The code offers transformations we've only dreamed of. Healing, creation, expansion of consciousness. Yet free will remains. Some may still try to twist it. Our best guard is unity, open sharing of knowledge, and humility before the cosmos." Julian's heart tightened. He sensed Ebony's focus drifting, as if part of her was perpetually communing with infinite fractals. "What if you leave?" he whispered. She offered a sad smile. "Then I'll leave behind a blueprint. Others can assume the caretaker role if their hearts are true. The code is not a toy, but a living tapestry. Every conscious being weaves it. Someday, we might not need a single caretaker at all." A surprising end and new beginnings. Weeks turned into months. Under Ebony's subtle guidance, restricted bits of the cosmic code were shared openly with scientific and humanitarian organizations. Medical breakthroughs emerged, new therapies for diseases once considered incurable. Ecological restoration projects used informed wave fields to heal damaged environments. A cautious optimism spread. Some looked to Ebony as a saint or avatar, while others feared the power she represented. She declined all worship, insisting that she was just a bridge, a caretaker. Quietly, she continued working with Julian, Chen, Christoph, and a circle of trusted allies to ensure that no single entity could monopolize the code. The memory of the magician's near catastrophe remained a sobering reminder. One day, Ebony vanished. Julian awoke to find her bed empty, her presence gone. In the lab, they discovered a swirl of fractal lights shimmering momentarily on the instruments before dissipating. A single note, scrawled in Ebony's handwriting, read, "I am always with you, in every quark, in every breath. The code belongs to all." Julian felt a pang of sorrow, but also a strange peace. He realized Ebony had transcended the need for a single point of being. She had become part of the universal tapestry she had merged with. Epilogue. A whisper of mystery. In the aftermath, the world changed in subtle yet profound ways. People reported more frequent synchronicities, a heightened sense of interconnection, as if the boundary between mind and matter had thinned. Institutions fought to regulate newly emerging reality-shifting technologies, while grassroots movements advocated for open-source approaches and ethical frameworks. The cosmos felt more alive, brimming with possibility. Some nights, Julian took long walks in the forest, listening to the wind in the trees. On one such night, a faint glimmer of fractal light danced at the periphery of his vision. He paused, heart pounding. A gentle voice, half in his mind, half in the rustling leaves, murmured, "Remember, reality is a story we co-author. Write it wisely." He stood there, tears forming, feeling her presence. Maybe Ebony was truly gone, or maybe she was everywhere now, a guardian that quietly guided the code she once helped decode. The final truth remained elusive, like the code itself, which continually changed and evolved. Yet in that uncertainty lay the majesty of existence, for the code was infinite, consciousness was infinite, and so was the possibility of shaping new worlds. Humanity had stepped through a door into a realm where matter was recognized as information, and the keys to the cosmic engine were partially in their hands. The story was just beginning, and so the reality's magicians, once close to unleashing havoc, were thwarted by an unexpected caretaker, Ebony Khatri, who gave herself to the code in a final act of love and awe. Mystery lingered, but hope did too. In the silent hum of the universe, the watchers could almost hear Ebony's voice whispering that it was up to all of us, each and every conscious mind, to be a magician of reality, creating wonder rather than destruction, weaving compassion into the cosmic code of existence.